My dad died and I'm scared my family won't get along. So yesterday after my dad comes home he eats what my mom made for him. Eggs and Spam. To be clear, he has a pre-existing medical history of high blood pressure and gout. First found out when he was admitted to the hospital in 2015 when he fell ill, and we basically had to force him to go to the hospital BC he didn't want to go. He was put on medication since, with changes to them maybe a year or so ago. So back to when after he ate. My half-sister heard a thud around 740-ish and told me to check BC. She thought maybe my parents are arguing. I go down and see my dad on the kitchen floor my mom behind him a few feet away and I hear him snoring. I ask my mom a question, get worried, run back upstairs and knock on my sister's door. She calls my other sister and also tells me to stop wasting time, call 911. I was scared and frantic. I wish I called 911 or saw him when he came in so I could maybe have called sooner. They get frantic too and we all start yelling at each other and I try to maintain order also as I'm talking to 911 person. At some point in all of this my brother-in-law yells for help and I help him turn my dad onto his side. BC he said he could choke on his saliva. My dad stops snoring and we start panicking. The EMS tells us how to perform CPR but my sisters keep yelling and so I try to get them working together. They finally start working on it. One is doing compression and the other giving him air and sometimes rotating. Fire department and ambulance gets here and they start doing the same thing but also have defibrillators and honestly, I'm just in shock still. It was maybe 8:03 p.m. when they came or so, I don't remember, it's all a blur. I checked my phone for timestamp, but I called twice so I forgot when original call was placed. They called it at 8:50 p.m. and I just began to lose it. My aunt comes and my sister is trying to call my dad's work to let his bosses know. We talk about how we want my dad's arrangements and agree on cremation. BC we don't have the money for anything else but also my sister wants the remains. My mom is bipolar schizophrenic and my sisters and bro-in-law don't get along. Her because of a whole history that would keep you here forever if I tried to type it. My dad was a bad person but he still chose us and tried his best to provide regardless of his fallacies. He had my mom's back too, saying he wouldn't kick her out or place her in a mental home. My sisters kinda want that, I think, but I'm scared to talk about it. My mom is okay sometimes but also acts up BC of her mental illness sometimes, and my dad and I were her constants regardless of what happened. My mom is old and still wants to benefit from some social security services that my dad had, but my sisters and I think we should get a majority control of his account. There's a lot of renovations to be done. BC he ignored upkeep of the house for a number of years, example, the roof. My mom is not very sad about the ordeal. BC she had a long history of mental abuse from my dad and I understand, but we for some reason stayed together. It how to move forward except for one moment at a time and I'm still waiting for funeral home to come pick up his body. It's 8:13 a.m. now, been waiting since night before. And I have been crying but also I can't sleep and I'm sorry if this doesn't meet guidelines. I just need to vent even though I told a few friends. I'm still in disbelief. How this will moving forward. I believe it can though. But it's hard to stay positive. I am 33 years old. I had a serious drinking problem since a young age. My dad was an alcoholic so booze never lacked in our house. It nearly killed me when I was only 27 and was in the for alcohol poisoning. It was too close a call and after that things had to change. With my wife's support, I went to rehab and proud to say I've been sober 5/1/2 YRS. My flatmate invited our friends over yesterday. It was 7 of us in total, including his friend, Mark. I've met Mark maybe 3 to 4 times over the last 2 years and while we're friendly, I honestly don't know him that well. But you can tell he's a party guy. Likes to get loud, take shots, makes gross comments sometimes, etc. Mark brought several cases of beer and a bottle of tequila with him so everyone was drinking and having a good time. Mark kept offering me drinks the entire night, which I'd politely decline. It's like he made it his personal mission to get me to drink by egging me on. Saying every time he sees me I'm either drinking a soda / water and it's okay to let loose sometimes. He resorted to teasing me into drinking, calling me princess. I don't know what that had to do with not wanting to drink. All my friends there knew what I was like before. How bad my drinking was so they kept trying to steer the conversation so he'd forget about me. But every now and then he'd hand me a shot glass or a beer and would not let it go even after telling him yet again that I didn't want to drink. My wife became uncomfortable with his behavior. I think she was worried I'd actually drink. She grabbed the shot glass from me, dumped it in the sink and told him to stop it already. He looked between us and grinned like he understood now. Mark joked that maybe we should get my wife drunk first, then that'll get her to loosen up the leash she has on me. I'll admit, that made me see red. I got in his face and told him, "Actually I don't drink because last time I did I almost King died, so unless you want me puking everywhere and having seizures you should shut up and leave my wife out of this." Wiped the smile off him real quick and he apologized. The rest of night went on and he finally left me alone. Our flatmate did confront me in the morning because he thinks I was too honest with Mark and it wasn't his fault, he didn't know. He was just joking around and I made him feel bad. Our other friends agree he was being too pushy and deserved being told off. My wife agrees, so he's the only one right now that's taking Mark's side. He said I could have ignored him until he gave up instead of bringing up an uncomfortable truth from my past. Now yes, I could have just told Mark the truth without full details but felt that's none of his business and a no should have been enough. I only got carried away when he decided to include my wife in his jokes. So yes, I am wondering if I was a bit of an a-hole for what I told him instead of keeping the peace. My sister and her husband have been struggling with infertility since they got married 12 years ago. They've tried absolutely everything, from medical to spiritual, but unfortunately, nothing works. Now that she's approaching late 30s, they're starting to look into adoption, but it's also been a slow going. Since their financial condition isn't exactly stable from multiple rounds of fertility treatments they went through. I can only imagine the struggle, and I sympathize with her. But the stress this situation is bringing her and her husband honestly puts a strain on our relationship. My husband and I lost our best friends, Mason and his wife, Kate, 2 weeks ago in a horrible car accident. They left behind their son Pete, who isn't even 2 yet. It was so sudden and so heart-wrenching. We're still grieving, which lowers out contact with a lot of people, including my sister and Bil. Our main concern right now is ourselves and Pete, whose custody has come to us because we're both his godparents. Actively engaged in Pete's life since his birth. And because Mason and Kate have neither left a will nor have immediate living relatives who can take him in. We've decided to adopt Pete as soon as we can stomach the process. My husband and I never planned on having kids, and even if we did, this is absolutely not the way we want to go about it. The situation is far from ideal, but we're starting the adoption process yesterday, for Pete's safety if nothing else. We broke the news to our extended families and friends, letting them know that my husband and I won't be very available for a little longer because of this. I know my sister and brother-in-law will have something to say about this. I'm prepared for a few heated text messages or voicemails. However, I didn't expect them to turn up on our doorstep, crying about how unfair it is that we were given everything they wanted, and how we didn't deserve to be parents because we didn't go through what they had to. I've never seen my husband so angry before. He's usually very mild and gentle, but recent events have stretched our patience to the limits. We kicked them off of our porch, and I told my sister before she left that since our pain inconveniences her so much, I won't have her around me and my family at all anymore. I know she made a fuss about it, and now everyone has something to say to us. We turned off our phones, so we don't know which ones are cursing us and which one aren't. I know some did //r. My husband and I are both in pain and grieving, and we can't trust ourselves to be objective. For the sake of disclosure, my husband and I are both men. No, this is not a case of homophobia. My sister, for all her fault, was the first person to accept me for who I love. I got my son a 7K motorcycle for his 18th birthday this past June. My son is obsessed with automobile and loves motorcycles. In his room he has plenty of models and posters of motorcycles of all types. His bio dad passed away when he was just 12, now I'm married to my current husband and he has kids of his own. My husband has always been against my son's interest in motorcycles. He thinks I'm encouraging him to be reckless, distracting him from school and by extension his future, and spoiling him and blowing away money by spending 7K on a motorcycle. This caused some tension between him and my son, so I told him to stop complaining about it. Around 2 weeks ago, my son's motorcycle went missing. We opened a police report, but nothing came out of it. It just disappeared. My husband had a smirk on his face the entire time, just walking around saying, "I told you so. You just wasted your money." This was unbearable to hear, to be quite honest. My mother-in-law visited few days ago. She was talking about the other house my husband owns and mentioned seeing a motorcycle. One that's similar to the one that we lost in my husband's carriage while she was cleaning it. She goes to clean that house weekly even though it's empty. My husband plans on giving it to his kids as inheritance. I was puzzled. I asked if she was certain, but she showed me a photo she took of it which confirmed that it was indeed my son's motorcycle. I immediately rushed to call my husband and confront him about it. He admitted that he took and hid the motorcycle in his garage as a last resort after me and his stepson kept brushing him, and his thoughts off about the $7,000 being spent on something unnecessary and that could cause issues. I blew up at him demanding he return it. He refused and told me he had been considering selling it and giving the money back to me so I could use it wisely this time. I told him I was serious and that I'd call the police. He literally said, "This is a family matter and cops can't do shit about it." I had enough. I called the cops soon as I ended the call with him. The motorcycle was found and returned. But my husband had to be taken in since there was an open file about the motorcycles going missing. He was let go eventually, but he was livid with me. He came home yelling about how awful what I did was and how crazy my behavior was. I refused to engage in the argument, but he told his entire family about it and they judged me for calling the police on my own husband, even though I already asked him to return it. He said he was just looking out for my son and that one day we'll realize that he was right, but only when it's too late. My son isn't speaking to me or my husband. I feel horrible about the whole situation and am starting to think I handled this the wrong way.